a conversation that could go on, you might say should go on within a business, specifically a hospitality business, but I think there are lessons to be drawn from this around how you look at the challenges which are all around us, how you understand them, how you make connections with them, and how you can, with our collective skills and experience, turn them into opportunities. And there's a specific way I'm going to go about that. For those who are less familiar, who might be watching the recording, in terms of an introduction, it's very much about giving every colleague or staff member, whether they're on the management team or not, irrespective of background or experience, the chance to take part in that conversation. So it's a fair and level playing field.
I can say that I've never, ever seen anything like it in any kind of way, not even from a recession point of view. You can't compare this with anything. This is new territory for everyone. So thinking out of the box becomes more relevant than ever. Dare to be different, as I call it normally in my sector, is so relevant. So there's many issues, and there was many issues before the pandemic broke out. There's some structural issue with this industry, and the overall issue is that the model is broken. You can't make enough money if you. There's a massive challenge around not only cash flow to run your business, but also making a profit. And the few that does it, they often sell their business on, and that thing is probably gone now. Nobody's going to come and pay major bucks for restaurant chains as it is right now. So there's massive issues around it's a passion industry, and we need to get back to. We need to use the pandemic. That's one of our opportunities to rethink the whole way we run restaurants. I don't have all the answers, but I definitely have the question that, is it right to work 80 to 100 hours as a manager or an owner and operator of a restaurant to get 2 to 3% in profit? Doesn't give any sense if you look at other industries. And I think, again, if we come down to the current environment, there's many issues on both structural issues, but down to day-to-day issues for the industry. We are approaching, one of the big things we're approaching is a totally meltdown of the industry, up to the worst case scenario, people saying 65% globally. Restaurants going to be disappearing. Some people say 40%, but there's definitely going to be less restaurant in 12 to 18 months than there was now. So that means jobs there's on the play as well. So we are a massive employer in the industry, but we're going to lose a lot of our great people, and we have to get rid of them, unfortunately. So what can you then do in all this? You can try, of course, to think out of the box, try to navigate down different route. And you've seen an industry, if you follow the news, and I know some of you have a foot into the industry, they've been very creative of finding different ways, but are they actually creating enough revenue? That would be my question. And I think also we're seeing an industry now that's becoming a bit more honest than they've ever been. Because normally when you ask people in hospitality, they will all say, oh, it's all great, it's going all fine. But I think now they're coming to say, well, it's absolutely shit, sometimes they directly. I don't know how I'm going to survive. So I think even though there's great innovation going on, there's also a lot of fear. And that's another challenge coming. What is going to happen with my business in 3 months' time when furlough stops? In a UK point of view, in many countries, the same in Australia. It's what I'm going to do if and when there comes a second spike in infection rates. What is that going to mean? Because many have opened now across the globe, but also we have in the US, you've seen areas of the US where restaurants have closed again. You're seeing it in Australia and areas again. So again, another massive challenge is that how do you survive this on and off mode, which probably going to happen as long as we don't have a cure. So another challenge is that the health crisis is actually having a massive impact on the restaurant. And how do you navigate that as an owner? Then you have your landlords. It's a massive challenge as well. You have massive rents, and you need to work with your landlord, or the landlord needs to work with you to survive, because the cost of your property is probably around, for some people, maybe lucky to have 8% of their revenue, but up to others is up to 20%, depending on what kind of deal they make. So massive challenges. If you then take it just down, the last thing I would say, I can continue to come out with challenges, but the day to day, there's two main challenges I've heard from operators. One of them is that when people book a seat in a restaurant, and there's actually a campaign going around right now on LinkedIn, they don't show up to their table. That's a massive issue because you book those people to that table. You don't have anyone standing outside that's going to take that table. So again, that's cash flow directly. And then actually some operators talked about, I talked with somebody this morning, he had to shut one of his stores again because he actually couldn't get the staff back. They're too scared, or they're in another country. They're not from a UK point of view, they're not here in the UK right now. They're in Spain, Italy, or France, and they actually don't know if they're going to come back. And that's what some of the most talented people we have in hospitality. So yeah, lots of challenges thrown in on the board there, and then we could continue.
That's brilliant.
Some of the biggest one, I would say, and there's more. There's a never end.
That's brilliant, Michael. Thanks for that intro. Now I'm on the screen, and I'm going to start whizzing around a little bit. I picked up 4 from what you said. So, and I've got a question for you as an example. So, at the top there, the on-off nature of the virus that could come back, and then the fear element. Just as a quick question, it's almost a yes/no. Is that more for me an external challenge that stays outside, or is it better linked into a particular part of the business who could be responsible for addressing that?
I think it's about, you need to ask yourself the question, I'd rather say as an operator, what have I put in place to make sure that I have revenue coming in when a second spike comes to cover the basic cost? That's
interesting. So I know I'm going to cut you off a bit, Michael, and apologies for that, but I'm going to abruptly bring that into play as a kind of, you've described a bit of a process, something needs to be in play there. So somebody is responsible in there, and we would go into who's responsible for that, but we haven't got time exactly to do that. But you can see me just clustering there. Now, normally in a conversation, I wouldn't be doing that. What I'd be doing is encourage the delegates, our wider team, to be thinking, because it's only then when they take responsibility for that. And that's what we wanted to do. Now, also what I would say is your other stuff around no-show, that's definitely on the customer journey line. So that would be a discussion about customer journey left to right. And then you also mentioned one in operations about no staff. So these are all big ticket items, and what I'm doing and what we'd be doing in a wider conversation to get everyone on the same page. The English language is beautiful for giving us lots of wriggle room, but what we're doing here is we're asking some punchy questions. Is what's that thing you said? These are rhetorical, by the way. What's that thing you said? What exactly is it? Where does it live? What is it connected to? And by understanding that clarification, it gives us a chance to do it.
The hospitality sector's either the 3rd or 4th biggest industry in the UK, and it employs like 3 million people directly and a whole lot more indirectly. And in London in particular is going to be very, very heavily damaged by this whole process, because something like 500,000 of the people in the hospitality industry live and work in London. So London and Southeast England are going to take a particularly devastating blow from this whole process. So the question, fortunately, your government has seen sense, and I looked at the list today of all the countries where people can come to you without going through 14 days of quarantine. Unfortunately, my country's not one of them, but all the usual suspects are there: Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Turkey. It seems almost most countries they've made this dispensation for. So at least you're still going to be able to get foreign tourists if they want to come, which many countries are not going to find they have that opportunity. So it seems to me that the major challenges are, if you accept that lodging or accommodation is at the heart of the whole process, and I hear Michael talking about how important restaurants and so on are, but you need people actually to stay in places so that they can do all the other things. You need them to stay there so that they can go and visit places. I look today, if I was in London today, I couldn't go to the London Eye because it's closed. I couldn't go to the British Museum because it's closed. Yeah. I could go to the Tower of London because it's open. But the Tower of London, along with the other palaces, has just reported that it's running a deficit of £95 million. So even the great classic sites are taking tremendous pain. So to me, one of the major challenges are how do we find replacement customers? Because Michael's mentioned people are scared, the staff are scared, customers are scared, everyone's scared. Unless you can get people into the system that are going to stay in accommodation or lodging, whatever you want to call it, and then from there buy food and go and visit castles and visit millennial eyes and so on, you've got a really major problem. You've got to get customers into the system to replace the ones that you're losing at the moment. That seems to me to be one of the major challenges that I see.
On that point, Bryce, may I ask, the way you describe that, you're almost hinting at the opportunity by the language that you use. So is then replacement customer an easy jump across to explore as an opportunity?
I think the one trend that seems to be emerging is what they're calling staycations. These are people that were going to go somewhere else and have a holiday that now are looking to stay locally. And sometimes those are almost what we in this country might call date night accommodation. In other words, you've been cooped up with your family for weeks at its end. If you could just get someone to look after them for 5 minutes, you and your life partner could go and have a date night and stay in a hotel nearby and get away from it all. And the other staycations seem to be whole families. So hotels that have multiple bedded rooms where you take your whole family with you. So you move your pod around with you to visit places that perhaps in the past you might not have gone. I mean, if you live in London, you might not bother to go to some of these places because there's so many tourists. But now suddenly there's much fewer people. So maybe it becomes more palatable for you as a local to go and visit some of these places.
No, I love that, Bryce. And what I like about what you've done, something has just happened, which often happens when we're in a room. I called out earlier that put your challenges on. You have put your staycations already on the board. So I've gone to put the opportunity symbol in the same place as you've already put it. Now, I think that's quite powerful because if we're doing that and thinking about something similarly, then other people within our group, maybe a disillusioned individual who has some thought, may have got involved with the process as well. So I love the repurposing of what's there already. And I was mentioning to you earlier about how some of these simple ideas are like stones that may be left currently unturned. So there are all these patterns, and the longer time we spent, if this was a 3-hour workshop with a team and we were changing the way people were thinking about the hospitality model, I think these challenges would start to, we would list them and it would all sound very gloomy, but by adding connections, we would then turn them into something positive. So at this point, thank you for that, Bryce. I'm going to go to Chris. I know I can see some action in the board, Chris. You've been placing some challenges on. So if I just share my screen and navigate around, I can maybe be your cursor and you can share with me where you've been going with it.
Okay. I think Michael and Bryce have articulated that really, really well. And it's funny because I had a conversation with somebody this morning who runs their own brand. My background's mainly in hospitality, is in kind of retail catering, as it were. And I have an old colleague who runs his own brand, who I was talking to this morning about the challenges he's facing, funnily enough, knowing I was doing this today. So I've just kind of put 3, which I think, Michael, you pretty much mentioned anyway. So number 1 is I've put the challenge around customers, in particular for retail and I guess restaurants as well and pubs. You know, the lack of people, the lack of footfall on the high street, and then having to reinvent how you get customers to come into your business and interact with your business from a catering point of view.
Yeah. So when I'm focusing there, Chris, is right on the left.
I put it on the right, but
that's
so mine's
interesting.
the one on the right. I talked about customer care, but it might not fit there.
No, that's interesting.
How do you encourage people? Yeah. Because somebody mentioned the word fear. I'm actually going on a date night tonight for the first time in 4 months to our local pub funnily enough. So we can drink, Bryce, which I'm really pleased about. But it's the first time myself and my wife will have been out for a meal in 4 months. And it is to the local pub. So it is the pub that we probably go to the most, if that makes sense. So for us, it's kind of a safe environment because we know it very, very well. So I think that's a challenge. You know, customers will venture out to a degree, but I think also they'll venture out to places that they're very, very familiar with, particularly the layout of, and the trust that they maybe have with the people that run that business, I would say. But I've put an opportunity symbol there because, and I think you mentioned it again, you know, is that then an opportunity to look at how we encourage people to interact with our business, and you're kind of forced to do it because the world has changed. I put another challenge, and this was mentioned today, and I think, Michael, you touched on it, landlords. You know, and you talked about the margins within the hospitality business. So my conversation this morning was that landlords with his particular business are not being particularly friendly, shall we say, or you know, working with people. So they're still getting charged the high rents without the business coming in. And that is a big challenge, particularly, again, as we said, when things start to change in terms of the furlough scheme in the UK. And everything else, that becomes a bigger challenge.
In my perspective there, Chris, what you've done there is, if I point up here to partners and suppliers, is the landlord more of a supplier of a property?
Yeah, it's probably a supplier. I mean, I just pumped for partner because I think they probably should be a partner.
Did you put that one in there? Now
I did put that one in there because I just think my version of that is, you know, people like that should be working with you rather than against.
I love that. The reason I love it, Chris, is what we're finding is, and this is me being quite punchy, but I do this in a room. If you don't write in or put the text, I don't know what you mean. So I didn't know that was your challenge. You don't have to apologise. It's just part of the big picture thing. If we're not clear and define things, I can't know. But what that shows is that you put it up there anyway. I was prompting you. And then you've made the differentiation between a partner and supplier, which is beautiful. So I get that, and we could have fun with that. But let's go on to your third one.
Well, the third one, again, my background, I was an operator to begin with, and then I fell into the world of training and learning and development, which I've been in for 20 plus years. So with my kind of L&D, looking after people head on, and I think, again, Michael mentioned the challenges around staff and team, both in terms of the fear, but also I think with the team that you've got, the motivation of people there. You know, if motivation is just around fear, that's not necessarily a good thing either. So I've put, it's right in the center, Martin. I haven't actually put it in a box. I was thinking about putting it into operations. So where I've got the challenge symbol and the team symbol right next to it. Yeah, right there, just outside the operations box to the left. I think you could widen that out and talk about staff throughout your business, not necessarily just in operations, but obviously operations is an area where, when we talk about job losses, that's an area. Well, I'm in L&D. We know about job losses in L&D. We know how departments going, but operations is obviously the front line, and therefore an area that gets looked at very, very quickly when it comes to cost cutting.
So here's the conversation that a master practitioner of Big Pick would come up with, because it's a simple framework, but it brings out something really powerful. So think about playing the ukulele. Anyone can get a sound out of it, but to get this kind of conversation out, you need to know what you're doing. The point is, I asked earlier, Michael, is fear for the whole organisation, or is it in one particular place? You, I've spotted, have automatically, without really realising it, in a good way, you've alluded or you've connected it more to operations than another part of the business. And that speaks volumes, because even if it's just a few percentage points, I think the indication you're giving to me is, to the room, with your skill and experience, it's probably going to hit hardest in the delivery area, where the rubber's hitting the road with the customer, where the value is being created. I think that might be the little connection you made, and I'd happily pull back from it. But it's those kind of conversations that give you the edge when you're trying to make your business more successful, because it's fine margins when it comes to success.
I think there's an addition to that challenge as well. And again, it's probably because of my background. And I think training is always a challenge in hospitality. You know, nobody ever wants to take people off the job to learn anything. It costs money, it's time. And I think in this environment now, even more so, that's the response. But at the same time, you know, people have got to learn different ways of working, or will be learning different ways of working as we speak, and already learned them to try and work in a different way around the customers. I've just been to Halfords today to have my wife's car repaired, and they've set up with, you know, all the social distancing and the tapes and everything else to tell me where to go and what to do. So it's all that sort of thing that's new to people, but they need to be able to do it, and doing it in a way that's still, you know, we're in hospitality. We have guests. We want to welcome people. We want them to make them feel at home, particularly when they come into our restaurant or our pub. And I think that's a little bit challenged when you have the social distancing measures in, which are brand new and feel quite functional, almost hospital-like in that environment. And that is a challenge where you need the team to be engaged. You need them to know what they're doing and to put the customer at ease or the guest at ease. So for me, that's another part of that challenge, particularly when they're fearful of their job. So there's a motivation issue there. You know, which I think, I'm not an operator currently. So for me, that if I was an operator, that would be playing on my mind a lot. How do I encourage my team? At the same time, I've got some, as Michael alluded to, some business challenges from cost perspective going on. And again, that was part of my conversation this morning with my friend.
No, that's fantastic. And thanks. And always well researched, Chris, and kind of current and topical. So that's brilliant. This is great to get an insight that works. So this is where my mind is with regard to the facilitation of this conversation. We've got Hewell and we've got Tunch on the line, and I know how well they've done this before and they're able to do this. I'm going to set you guys a little challenge. To Hewell first, with a focus on money and the money symbol. I'd love you to take one of the challenges as a kind of starting point, hook through into money, and maybe end on one opportunity that comes out of that if you're able to. And I might have overreached you a little bit, but I want to try it because this is what I'd be doing with Big Picture in the Room. We have to get to opportunity, and I'm going to send you through money, Hugh, to get there. If you could give that one a whirl for me.
Is that me, Martin? Yeah.
It is to Hugh. Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, right. So listening to everything that's being said, on the money side, it's got to be a completely different outlook to the way that the hospitality industry has been behaving up until now. So I've got money symbols in the management side because there are cash flow issues. I also had put money in the operations and services side. Because there is a complete difference with how they're going to treat staff and people. And then in the customer care, there is something that needs to be done with regard to consumer behavior and markets and demands. And one of the things that I would be looking for is, if we're going to have to do things differently, how are we going to do that? And during the lockdown, we've seen opportunities being taken in the event industry or in the hospitality industry, whereby things have been done online. And in sports, up until now, we have got an answer that I feel is available to the hospitality industry, and that is pay-per-view. For example, when we had the global choir playing online, why would somebody who had been responsible for that event not ask, for example, for, you know, £5 or whatever in order to listen to a concert from a global choir, which I would have thought would have been absolutely wonderful. So that's the type of opportunity, monetary, financial opportunity that I feel needs to be looked at by the hospitality industry to see how they can move in on an area which is already familiar in the sports arena in particular.
I'm going to jump at this point, Hugh. Can I just check on something? Because I love this. You've taken me in my brain into a new place. So I've noted pay-per-view. I've plonked it in services. And I can't see Michael's face, but I know Michael and his knowledge of what's going on in the industry. Michael, if I say to you, hospitality, probably services, but there's an opportunity around pay-per-view, what is your brain telling you? What connection are you making with pay-per-view?
I think it's an absolutely brilliant question, because I don't have the initial answer, but I can see where you're coming from, because lots of hospitality is about experience as well. And I think it's about, there's no doubt about hospitality businesses need more than one revenue stream. That's for sure. And you can see lots of trying to launch them. And I've said to many of them, I've talked with, I said, and some of the ones we launched ourselves, we haven't really seen the fruit of yet, because there's no business you launch and then day one, the tap is just floating like insane. So I think it's an interesting thought. How I would pay-per-view a restaurant. I'm also been talking about a bit like hotels. So your seats have different prices at different times a day. So fluctuating prices. So there's some restaurants, especially an Indian one I work with, they are always booked up at night. And they're booked out 3 weeks in advance. Why shouldn't they charge more? And they serve brilliant food. That's why.
But also, Michael, in that respect, I would be suggesting, and I've suggested this on another one, is why are people not paying 50% up front? Why not have a deposit? It's a completely new idea for the culture of entertainment like that. But if you're going to go to watch a play, for example, you pay for your tickets before you go there, and if you don't turn up, that's your problem. Why can't it be the same in the restaurant industry?
Right, guys, I'm getting really excited now, because what's happening is we're connecting and joining. And if you watch what I've done on the board, if we were in a room at a board, we had a challenge from earlier called No Show. I think the way my brain works, and this could be from anyone in the team, the antidote to No Show is the payment up front. And that came because we wanted to get it in quickly, but it connects to something we've talked about earlier. And this happens all the time. This is because we're working on a shared view, and we got the pay-per-view, which led to fluctuating prices, which led to payment up front. So I could almost draw a triangle around those three, which is the structured brainstorming that Hugh talked about last time we won. We've just seen that happen. To me, that's exactly what we should be getting at. I'm going to run out of time, because we always do, but I'm going to go to Tunch. Hugh, that was brilliant, as usual. Lovely connections. You took us into a new place. You did something that I do in a room with Big Pick, which is the bit between challenge and opportunity. You can throw in a creative element. You can say, what's the most successful video game around? What's the advert that's on TV that everybody likes? What is it? Why do they like it? How can it apply in this sector, in this business? And immediately, someone like Michael says, actually, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer, but what if, or yes, and those are great conversations. I'm going to go to Tunch, because I've asked him to look at technology and process, which are the two symbols we've not looked at. What I do isn't that smart. I just pick off these symbols and I throw them at people and see what they've come up with, and it works for anybody. So Tunch, if I say to you technology and process, how have we managed not to talk about it so far?
Guys, it's really interesting what we've been discussing here. Is one of the key workers I've been during this COVID process as a retail manager. I come from Argos background. I believe it's in the high street. It's one of the, maybe the only winner of this difficult times that we lived in. And how have we become winner in this sector is because Argos uses the technology rather than bringing the customer into Argos. We started delivering the service to the customer and made the big difference there by use of our prepay, which is what's been mentioned, prepaid option and fast track delivery options. So there's a lot, I think, to learn for the high street and the retail world from Argos model by the fast tracking the orders or the customers' demands, bringing them to their houses. Now, in the hospitality and restaurant sector, I've seen it recently through TGI Fridays doing a very similar thing with it. Basically bringing that thank God it's Friday atmosphere in TGI Fridays, carrying it to the customer and delivering it to them and fast tracking it. giving them that notion that they are protecting their actual customers and also their finances as well. So I would say Argos' success on Fast Track and Prepay, we're considering 760 stores within the UK of Argos. They've shut 55% of them stores. And we still managed to finish the first quarter of the year with 10% up above like-for-like sales during these difficult times, purely because Argos had the right technology and the model of delivering the customer what they need as quick as possible, as soon as possible, in the safest, best possible way, by cutting the cost as well in between, because obviously we worked with less staff, we worked with less demand and less overheads, whereas we could actually supply the customer. So it is very important to thinking about considering what it's going to be like if there are any new waves of COVID or similar viruses arriving in our world. It's very important to understand how we are going to operate, what the model is going to look like. And it's also been mentioned that it's important to gain this confidence of your own colleagues, for employees, as much as your customers. So from internal and external point of view, it's important to have that model ready to be able to answer.
One thought there, Tunchin, as usual, you've laid in like point after point. It's just fantastic. One thing I took and I wanted to come back to is to simplify the fact that some business models, and I think you've called out Argos there are elements of their business model, and I hope this resonates with Bryce, that there are elements of that business model of Argos that were more easily transferred or adapted into current circumstances. And I remember a great post you did, Bryce, and it wasn't directly related, but about the Panay catfish, that there are hidden elements of business models that probably have not been fully utilized, but then Argos found it a lot easier to pull that forward into the current circumstances, and that stood them in really good stead. But there are so many points there, Tunch, that you made, and what I would say is, I asked you a question about technology, and actually we'd managed up to that point to not talk about technology, but it's that I'll come back to the layering. Looking at these symbols, it happened to be technology, but if we've got this framework right, and when it lands in the room, you could prompt for technology. We're not going to get time to look at process. But process is equally important. You know, process can play a part. It popped up earlier when we were talking about one of Michael's challenges, I think, from earlier. But the fact is, this on-off thing about how management deal with the on-off nature of the virus, the fact of the matter is that the reason I wanted to demonstrate it is, just because we're specialists and we can add in these layers, I think colleagues and employees should and could get involved in this conversation. Totally. And I think we've proved today you don't need a business background. You throw in these prompts, and I think what's exciting here is by putting in the right prompts and giving them the right environment and the right kit and the right resources, we can have these conversations quicker. And if I had a chance to tidy up this board and to draw attention to some areas of it, we might come up with a bit of a DNA with regard to opportunities, and we would take them over to the right-hand side where we've got them all here. And we haven't got time, but we would run a session saying, we've come up with a great opportunity of fluctuating prices, but actually should we be focusing on them, staycations, and this concept of pay-per-view? And we haven't got time to look at 7 opportunities because we're limited. But let's look at the top 3, and we would put some criteria around it. And in my experience of change, that conversation is sometimes really incredibly difficult and long-winded if you don't have an elegant framework that everyone's bought into, because people are acting and are being part of it. And I've loved seeing that play out today.